thank you for everybody who's joined us today. I'm Emily Newberry. I'm the Research and Scholarship Librarian at the Thompson Library here in Flint. And occasionally on Fridays, we do these workshops, webinar kind of things, just kind of familiarizing you guys with the different resources we have here in the Thompson Library and beyond. And today is one of those beyond days. We've invited Becky Welzenbach, who is the Information Science Librarian, who also deals with research impact in Ann Arbor. And so she is a fantastic resource for all this kind of information. So we've asked her to come and kind of just share the general layout of, like how you can go about tracking your scholarly output. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her. We're so glad to have you here today, Becky. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Emily. Yes, I'm glad to be here. I work in the university library on the Ann Arbor campus, and I'm part of the social sciences team there. So I'm part of our research group, and I work with other librarians, mainly supporting the social sciences. But in terms of research impact and sort of managing your scholarly identity, how and where you show up, who's finding your work, I work with folks from all different disciplines. And I especially am interested in and enjoy helping folks who are in the humanities or in other areas where their work maybe doesn't fit so easily into some of the buckets that we usually think of for research impact. What we're going to do today is have some conversation. It's going to start really from sort of how you show up just on the web and how people can find you and sort of how you're managing that identity. And then we will talk through some options, some ways that you can manage that presence a little bit, including where and how your work is showing up and being found. We're not going to have time today to get deep into some of the very specific citation counting and that kind of thing that you might need to do for a promotion dossier, using something like Scopus and counting up all of your publications and citations. I have kind of a framework that I'm going to walk us through. We're going to look at a few different like tasks or activities you could tackle if you wanted to have a sense of yourself and your work and sort of leaving a record of your work online. But please jump in or ask questions or make comments or offer your own perspective sort of as we go, because there's lots of room for that and there aren't that many of us. So hopefully my sort of map will just guide us along a conversation, but I welcome you to participate however makes sense for you as we go along. So to get started, I enjoy asking everyone to do this at the start of these workshops, just because it brings us all to kind of the same place as we're getting started. I'd invite you, if you have a laptop with you, of course you have a laptop with you. If you're able to do it now, maybe in a separate tab, open an incognito or private browsing session and just do a search for yourself, for your name. I'm always curious to just see what comes up for people, if they're finding themselves more, as a personal presence or a scholarly or professional presence, what surprises you, and just kind of to start thinking about like, what do you want people to find about your work, if they're searching for you on the web. So yeah, opportunities to increase the visibility of your work, make your scholarship, your research, your teaching and service sort of known, can help people figure out who you are, what your area of expertise is, can also help to sort of validate what might be on your CV or in something that, has been said about you or a way that you've described yourself. And, I'm a member of this committee. And then if you come up on the committee webpage, that sort of validates all of that. And there's this idea sort of by being proactive and sort of managing yourself, your identity, your work online, that you can have a little bit of control over sort of how you're presented on the web. Not all the control, right? We can't exactly know what's going on with Google search algorithms. There's not so much we can control, but some of the things that we're going to talk through and look at today are just some kind of clear like footholds where you can sort of assert yourself and your work and your presence, to build this sort of stable sort of frame for yourself and your work online. So these are sort of the recommendations that I often make to people, and we'll look at them briefly. We don't have time to like fully go through each one and do them all together right now. But I will say a little bit about each one and sort of point you to how you could do these things. And I'll make sure that you have these slides and links so that you could follow these steps on your own if you like. And we'll talk a little bit about sort of what function each of these serves and why they're important. I had something else I wanted to say, but maybe not. We'll just jump in. The very first thing that I always recommend people do is register an ORCiD. Have folks done that already or not? I see Mary is nodding. Angela, no. Okay, so an ORCiD is an identifier that becomes associated with you as a researcher. Part of its value is to help disambiguate your name from others. So Tuesday, you mentioned on Facebook, other people with your name came up. If any of those other people happen to be researchers or happen to be in your same area, that could be extra confusing. ORCiD is there's lots of ways to assign identifiers to people and individuals. One of the reasons that ORCiD has been taken up pretty broadly at this point is because it is a sort of a standalone registry. It's institution neutral. So you register your ORCiD one time, and even if you go to a different university, change jobs, change names, you keep the same ORCiD. And the idea is that then that can be attached to anything that you publish, things you present, places you appear. And then all of that work or those grants, that funding, other things you've done can all sort of be mapped back to the same entity, which is you. Increasingly, funding agencies and publishers are asking folks to submit an ORCiD as part of, when you submit a manuscript, you include your name and you include your ORCiD. It's increasingly required, and from federal funding agencies as well. Thought just went. I know what I was going to say. On the Ann Arbor campus, at least in the Rackham Graduate School, PhD students are required to have an ORCiD in order to submit their dissertation. So I'm not certain if that is also the case at Flint, but it's more and more just kind of part of the infrastructure of becoming a researcher and putting your work out into the world. So it's definitely one of the first things I recommend folks do for keeping track of themselves and their work. To look quickly at how we can do that, I will make sure that you guys have a link to this resource as well. All the activities are laid out sort of with step-by-step instructions here. But all you really need to do is go to ORCiD. The right link. This is actually orcid.org. And if you go to sign in or register, you can choose to sign in through your institution. And I think, Emily, are the campuses separated or is it?
I cannot remember if in ORCiD they are. I think it's just one. We're all affiliated through there.
So if you click to sign in with your organization, you'll be asked to just supply your regular U of M like login credentials. So you don't have to create a new account. You don't have to come up with a new password or anything. It'll be tied to your U of M identity. And then, if you were to move to a different campus, that can be changed. Once you're in there, let me sign in myself. Give you a sense of what this thing looks like. To do my Duo authentication, so many steps. Okay, I'm in. Once you are in, you will encounter a sort of a profile page like this, and you have a lot of options as far as how much information, if any, you really want to add to this profile. The key thing, well, sort of like the two parts of it are you get this identifier, which is what you will need if you are submitting something for publication or for grant funding or just wanting to use this as the sort of consistent, unambiguous identifier that can be attached to your identity. But you can also fill this out as much as you want to in the same way that you might a LinkedIn profile. You can have education and qualifications, job experiences. You can pull in funding that you have received as well as scholarly works. And those don't necessarily need to be added manually. You can pull them in from other sources, where they might be published or indexed, such as Scopus or the Crossref registry of DOIs. So you can sort of associate works with your profile here, but you have control over pretty much every aspect of it. You can choose what you want to make visible or not visible. You can make things to be, so that only you can see them. You can also just choose not to flesh this out very much at all and just register it and get that number, because that's the piece that you'll probably need. So ORCiD is very, very like researcher driven. They want to leave as much in the hands as the researcher as possible. So you have a lot of autonomy over how your profile shows up. But I do recommend that everybody just go ahead and register for this number and then kind of hold on to it, because you're very likely to need it again.
I just want to say, I recently had to get that ORCiD number. I was asked to be a reviewer for a professional journal.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually review the article in ORCiD.
Oh, really? Interesting. Okay.
And then you put your sort of expertise out for if other people want you to review that article.
Okay.
So then you could have this list of publications or an area of expertise that you're developing.
Cool.
For the article itself, for that area of research.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of interest in trying to figure out better ways to give folks credit for the work that they put into reviewing, and to sort of acknowledge them as a reviewer, and that being scholarly work of its own. And ORCiD, I think, has been involved in finding ways to make that visible. So that's cool to hear an example of that. Thank you.
Yes, that's how it was done for this particular article. And like you say, you establish yourself as an expert in that area by reviewing other works of literature or research.
That's great.
Can I just point out real quick too,
Oh,
Becky,
sure.
like while you're on this names thing here, this is just like, Becky already kind of said that, like getting your profile, but yeah, we've had a bunch of, faculty, I think this happens everywhere where people get married, get divorced, change their names. And so, this is a really great, you see how she has her names there, like if there's previous names you've had, being able to, because I know that's been a concern to some people, like if I change my name, how do people find my previous, research? So this is a way to get around that too.
So the next thing I often recommend people do is claim their Google Scholar profile with your U of M credentials. Is that something folks here have done already? Perhaps, or no? Okay, so let's look at that together. Who has used Google Scholar, to do research or to look up other people's work? Almost everybody, right? So Google Scholar is it sits at this very interesting place where almost everybody uses it. It's incredibly popular. It's incredibly accessible. Everyone is familiar with it. And yet it's kind of a black box. It's not a very well supported tool from Google. It does what it does. Okay. But its features are not terribly robust. And unlike ORCiD, where you have like complete control over every part of your profile, in Google Scholar, you don't have so much control. Google Scholar also doesn't play well or communicate well with other services. So while ORCiD is really great at connecting and like porting data between systems, like different publication platforms or funder platforms, these kinds of things, Google and ORCiD don't talk to each other, which is a huge bummer because they're basically redundant. And yet Google Scholar is so widely known, widely used that I can't recommend that people just, don't do it or ignore it, because it's just so familiar to folks. So the way that one would go about this is, you go to Google Scholar and you want to sign in the upper right-hand corner with your U of M identity. And then up in the left, there will be this My Profile option. I can click on it for myself, but if you've never done it before, yours will look different. You'll be prompted to give a little bit of information about yourself. likely they will try, if you have publications already, they will propose some to you and say, are these yours? And if so, you can go ahead and claim them. They also may ask you, would you like us to automatically claim publications that we think are yours? Or would you like us to alert you every time that we find something that we think is yours? And then they'll send you an email and you can claim it. That choice is really up to you. And honestly, it may depend on how common your name is and how successfully Google has already matched things to you. As Rebecca Welzenbach, pretty much everything they find with my name on it is mine. Angela Smith, that might not be the case for you. I would urge you, if there's a likelihood of duplication or of mismatch of publications to names, I would strongly suggest that you say, please alert me before claiming something. Don't have Google auto claim it. And one reason for that, this is one of the huge drawbacks of the Google Scholar profile, is if a work that you authored has been claimed by somebody else or attached to somebody else's profile, there's like almost nothing you can do to get it fixed. Whether that happened by mistake, if another Angela Smith said, sure, auto claim my works, and something of yours got claimed by that person, Google Scholar doesn't have any way of repairing that. You can sort of like report it, but nothing really happens. You can try to reach out to the person and ask them to unclaim the thing that they've claimed, but there's no, Google Scholar is not like moderated or curated by anybody, really. It's kind of wild and chaotic. And I hear from people who find that works of theirs have been, potentially by accident. It's not necessarily malicious, but that their work has been claimed by somebody else and is attached to somebody else's profile. And there's nothing that they can do to like ensure that gets fixed right away. So it's a problem. Google Scholar has flaws. Things that people like about it are being able to get some of these like metric types of information, like how many citations does Google Scholar think I have in total or since 2009? Of course, that depends on them having an accurate sense of your publications in the first place. But people like these kinds of things. It's nice in terms of tracking your output. It's really nice to set up alerts to get an email, every time they think they have found a new work by you, or even more interestingly and more difficult to track, every time they think they've found a new citation to your work. Can be great to get alerts for that. So yeah, Google Scholar, I think, like many parts of our scholarly infrastructure, but worse than many of them, it's got some real flaws. It's not very well supported, and it's so widely used that we still kind of have to be there. For those who may not have publications yet, a couple of years ago, my recollection was that you couldn't really claim a profile unless there was already a publication that you could attach to it. Is that still looking like the case now? Anybody seeing that? So a third way to help make your work visible is to think about putting it out there online in a repository of some kind. Is anyone currently using a tool like ResearchGate, or ResearchGate is the one that I think of most commonly, or academia.edu, or have you put your work in a repository of any kind? Maybe not. Okay. So this can be useful in a number of ways. The repository that I always think of first and is just most familiar to me is Deep Blue, which is the one hosted at the U of M library. And anyone affiliated with U of M can deposit work here. If you have never done it before, you will probably need to contact the Deep Blue folks, and they'll basically connect you to a collection or a space where your work can be deposited. But you can upload just about any kind of scholarly work here. For me, that tends to be presentations, which is great because there aren't good ways of publishing these otherwise. And so what will happen then is I just upload my PDF. I describe it a little bit, say the title and the date and say something about what it was. And then the file is downloadable here. This page will get indexed by Google Scholar. So then this will turn up in Google Scholar if other people are, researching my topic, my workshop or presentation or paper or whatever will turn up there. It will also give me download counts. So if somebody finds this work in Google Scholar and then comes here and says, oh, that sounds interesting, and they download the slides, Deep Blue will keep track of that. And every month I get a little summary report of what's been downloaded from Deep Blue of my work. So for me, where I'm not publishing a lot of formal journal articles, I'm doing a lot of instruction, a lot of workshops, a lot of presentations. This is a really nice way for me to like organize my work and also keep tabs on if it's getting found, if it's getting used, and to have sort of stats on those things. Most universities at this point have some kind of institutional repository like this. Some of them look a little bit different, but the idea is the same. There's a place to sort of collect your work, your publications. Even journal articles that you have formally published in, in a journal, whichever journal you've published it in, increasingly, journals are allowing authors to deposit their work in repositories like this, whether it's the final published version or sometimes like a pre-formatted version, like just your manuscript before it was formatted and published with the journal. Each journal will let you know what is permissible for them, but more and more journals allow authors to do that. So even if your work is published somewhere else in a subscription journal, it's very likely that you have the right or the ability to post it somewhere like this. I also really like having work in a repository like this because you get this stable URL that won't break, that you can always use to point back to your work. So then if on your faculty webpage or on your university directory page or your LinkedIn page, your CV, anywhere that you might want to link to your work or make your work visible, you can use this stable URL, which will bring people, back here again. You don't have to worry about uploading PDFs to a web server somewhere, or about them breaking or being taken down. They'll be sort of safely and stably here, and you can point to them from wherever you might be. So that's a really good way to both preserve and make your work sort of visible and accessible online, and have good, at least reasonable metrics about how much it's being used and found by others. Yeah, Susan, go ahead.
What do you see as the major differences between something like ResearchGate, which is a place that I have been in the past, and Deep Blue?
Great question. So, I mean, the biggest difference is that ResearchGate is a commercial social media platform, basically, akin to Facebook or Instagram, even though it acts different. It feels more academic. It's a company like any of those, right? So they could be sold, they could be acquired, they could go under, they could lose everything. So it works well as far as sharing goes. I've heard from some folks who really like the community aspect of ResearchGate. They've found co-authors there, or people that they might want to collaborate with. People have discovered their work there. But I wouldn't recommend it as a sort of stable long-term place to keep your materials and be able to point back to them again and again.
Thank you.
Other questions? I always point to Deep Blue just because I'm familiar with it. But there are also disciplinary repositories where people often publish preprints or, other versions of their work. The big one that I think of is arXiv in math and physics, which I don't think anyone on the call today is in those areas. But there are spaces like that where you can deposit your work, make it visible, get a stable URL like this, and where colleagues in your field perhaps are already familiar with and part of that community and going there. And so I recommend those as an option as well. The fourth thing here is we're not going to do it all in detail right now, but I'll just let you know about it. It's really just a little worksheet that you may or may not wish to look at on your own that kind of walks you through thinking through your presence on various social media, and kind of where you want to be or not. This is in no way a checklist of things that I think you should do or anyone thinks you should do. It was just as many different services as I could sort of think of, and other ones that people have told me that they use, just to try to get you thinking about everything and reflecting on those things. And to encourage you to think about, like, have I looked at my privacy settings in the last year? Have I thought about, how my name appears there? Do I want my Instagram and my, scholarly identity to overlap with one another, or do I want them to be completely separate? And just to like take a day, take some time, work through it, and then maybe make some of those choices in an intentional way. There aren't any single right answers. What works for different people works for different people. Some people really want to present a sort of coherent identity that's, their full name, their work, their personal life, all of those things all sort of in one go. Some people don't want to be on social media at all, which is completely fine and probably wise. Some folks maybe are on social media, but they want it to be only about food and they use a made up name, there's no correct way to do it. The idea is just to take the time to think about making your choices in a deliberate way, and specifically thinking about your work, your professional identity, your scholarship, and sort of choosing on purpose what's best for you about what you want to show up and where, and either bringing things together. If you want your LinkedIn and Twitter and Google Scholar to all sort of connect, then make sure your name is the same in all those places. Set your privacy settings accordingly. If you don't want those things to all connect, then, maybe think about changing names or adjusting privacy settings so that they're not showing up. Yeah, but questions, thoughts, experiences, good or bad?
I guess I'd just say it's hard to keep up with very many, so I have kind of
Sure.
focused on just a couple and trying to make them up to date, because otherwise I just am out there, but I'm not really present and it's not being kept up to date or an accurate representation.
Absolutely. That's such a great point that I think, not trying to spread yourself too thin and show up, have an account on all of these places when you don't want to, and there's no benefit in, being in all those places. Just select the one or two or whatever that work for you and engage there, I think is a really, really smart way to go about it.
And I would also add that it's sometimes, in LinkedIn or that's the one I'm most familiar with, you can get on more specific groups. I was on a nurse educator one for many years, and the only problem is it was constant, notifications. It was almost too much. But that's another way to be able to do that, is sometimes within those, there's a smaller subset.
That's a great point, to belong to a professional community. So yeah, it's not just throwing your voice out into the world like on Twitter, but connecting with others in a more focused way. Yeah, I really like that. So something to delve into if and when you choose. And then the last sort of piece of it, I just call pulling the pieces together. And this is where you think about how you want things to show up together. This is where, if you have a faculty or a doctoral candidate like university page, this is where I encourage folks to focus. Like, is the picture there current? Is the contact information current? Do you want that page to point to your LinkedIn or point to your ORCiD or point to your Twitter? If so, make sure all those links are there. It's the place to kind of, connect all the dots and bring all the things together. There are pros and cons to having like your own website apart from an institutional web page. And that comes back to, I think, kind of like what Susan was saying. How much do you want to have to keep it up? The less you have to make constant changes and be on top of it and updating things all the time, the better, I would argue. On the other hand, if you're on the job market, or you're really in a place where you're actively establishing your identity sort of apart from the institution, it probably makes a lot of sense to have your own website or your own web page. For me, I just have my staff page on the library website. But I try to have the things there be consistent with how I'm showing up in other places as well. I know it really depends. Folks I've talked to on the Ann Arbor campus, totally depending on what school or college they're in, they may or may not be able to edit that page for themselves. I know folks in LSA on the Ann Arbor campus have to like request tech support to have changes made to their like little summary page on the website, whereas in other schools, there's parts of it that folks can edit for themselves. I don't know what the situation is for you at Flint. Anybody have a personal website totally separate from the institution that you're happy with? What sort of solutions have you looked at for, either hosting or tools to use? Anybody have any great examples, or is that something anyone is struggling with?
Not using one,
You're not. Yeah.
no.
I used to, and I kind of abandoned it because I wasn't keeping it up and I didn't really need it. Yeah, I think the minimal and accurate is kind of the way to go.
I haven't been using Google Scholar much, but you got us looking at that again. And
Mhm.
I'm not finding very many of my colleagues when I'm searching for them, which I find surprising on Google Scholar.
Interesting. So their work is not coming up, or that is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have the research productivity that Ann Arbor does, but I know that, when I'm looking for colleagues' names, that they have
Sure.
been publishing in some in recent years. And,
Yeah.
when I do it, it's like your name's not matching any profiles. So I'm thinking
Mhm.
most of the people that I've looked at so far don't have Google Scholar profiles, or that they've not been widely used in my disciplines and areas where I'm looking, is my guess.
I think that's a very good guess. I think that's probably it. It's likely that their individual publications may be in Google Scholar somewhere, but if they have not claimed their own profile, then it wouldn't, their name wouldn't be linked and it wouldn't show up in that way. It's possible that, especially if the article was published with just like a last name and a first initial, for example, which is more common in some journals and some fields than in others, that it might be harder to find them. So yeah, that's another sort of piece of Google Scholar. So by contrast, for example, with a database like Scopus assigns an identifier to every author, and then they try to link all of those. So if you just were to log into Scopus and look for an article, Scopus would make its best effort to say, yeah, here's the author of this article, and you can link to all the other things we think are also authored by them. Google Scholar won't do that unless, or like, you don't become a person in Google Scholar until you claim your profile, basically. So even if your work
Makes
is
lots
there,
of sense. Yep.
yeah, they're not aware of you as an individual. All right. Well, these are sort of the steps I wanted to share with you today and talk through. And they spurred a bit of conversation, which I was hoping they would. Some links that you may just want to explore on your own as you further. I know some of you were more specifically interested in sort of tracking and assessing research outputs for promotion and tenure, as well as issues that can crop up evaluating across different disciplinary lines, which is a really big issue. Some of the guides that I've linked here might help you on that path a bit. It also sounds like, if Emily and Liz have time or want, we could also do a whole nother conversation more specifically on that topic. So yeah, are there other questions, ideas, anything you'd like to share?
I guess if there's time, and if there's other questions, please take them first. But if there's time, I guess I'm interested in hearing, aside from Scopus, if you want to direct me, maybe it's just these things on the page, and when I get the slide, I'll be able to get into them. But I'm just trying to get a handle on how you get quantification and those sorts of things, H indexes, I indexes, where I could get some good info about that.
Yeah, so let me see. This one is really useful. I'm going to drop the link to it in the chat. It was created by the health science informationists here at the Ann Arbor Library. So it has that lens on it a little bit, but it's a very useful overview of things like H-index, different metrics for evaluating different types of research outputs. H-index is a really interesting one because it's sort of like the journal impact factor. It's widely regarded as a pretty flawed metric, and yet the appetite for, a nice number that will just sum everything up is so strong that people always still want that H-index anyway. H
Like
index is
most of our assessments, right? Student evaluations, we say the same thing, but we continue
Yeah.
to collect them and rely
Exactly.
on them and all of
Yeah.
those things. Yeah.
I will say, Susan, you were the one who said you were interested in, you'll be looking at portfolios of work across different disciplines, right? And so needing to
Yes.
be aware of that. Yeah. I mean, almost any numerical indicator is going to be pretty flawed for that, but H index in particular, just because the sort of pace of publication and pace and culture of citation varies so much from discipline to discipline that those numbers, they just really can't be compared. So that's tough.
Right. No, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I was dealing with in previous roles, everything from performing arts, theater,
Sure.
music, all the way through the hard sciences. And
Absolutely.
I understand that many of these things don't even appear in places that would be indexed.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I get that, but I was just wondering what kind of resources were out there on the strengths, the things you need to watch out for, the liabilities of some of these various ways of trying to quantify
Yeah.
impact.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd recommend starting with this guide. I also want to see, let me see. There was a great resource that was quite robust a few years ago. And then unfortunately they were moving platforms and the people who were maintaining it sort of got busy with other things and it started to fall down a little bit. But this metrics toolkit also was quite strong. Yeah, what I recommend is this browse metrics. And they've done that sort of overview that you were just mentioning for all of these different forms, different ways of sort of counting or quantifying scholarship. So if you click on one, it will say, what's it called? Who is it applied for? How is it calculated? Where can you get it from? When is appropriate or not appropriate to use it? So this is a really useful overview as well.
Thank you very much.
Well, if others don't have questions, I'm going to say thank you so much to Becky. I think this was so useful, just getting us all sort of to see the landscape of things. And we appreciate your expertise and your willingness to come and talk to us today.
Thank you for watching this recorded webinar. Find upcoming webinars to register for at libcal.umflint.edu.